We're often told that you should never judge a book by its cover, but we're also told that there are no second chances when it comes to first impressions. What's going on, you guys? Petplatypus here, and I'm going to talk about how important it is for an anime, or any show really, to have a strong, unique visual identity. So what do I mean when I say a show needs a visual identity? I mean that it needs a distinct art style that it can call its own, or even if it looks kind of like your generic anime, it needs to look just unique enough so that you can differentiate it from other anime. Examples of this would be Assassination Classroom, Attack on Titan, and a few other things like that, like Sword Art Online, which it's hard to give Sword Art Online praise, but still, kind of looking like anime, but distinct enough to where if you saw a screenshot randomly and you'd never seen the show, you'd probably still recognize it if you've heard of the show. Whereas with other anime, like a lot of other anime out there, you see a screenshot and you have no idea what show it's from at all, whether you've heard of it or not, because it just looks that generic and that run-of-the-mill, you know, with your brown-haired, shaggy-headed protagonists. Like, it's crazy. Even Attack on Titan has one, but it's still, it keeps things unique with its color palette, its shading, how detailed the eyes are, things like that. When I say a series needs a strong visual identity, I'm not saying it needs to look a certain way, because everyone has different preferences. I love how One Piece looks. However, there are people who are put off by its art style. And then there's vice versa. I don't like how modern JoJo's Bizarre Adventure looks, like Part 7, Part 8. I don't like those art styles. But there's probably people out there that do. I'm not saying you have to look a certain way to appeal to the masses. That's all a matter of opinion. What I am saying, though, is you should have a distinct identity. One Piece, My Hero Academia, Dragon Ball, Hajime no Ippo, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. These shows all have strong, distinct art styles where I don't think, if you've heard of JoJo and you've seen images of JoJo, if you saw a character from a later part that you've never read, you'd probably still recognize that it's JoJo. You know, it's the same thing with Akira Toriyama's art style in general. You pretty much know when Akira Toriyama's doing something. It's how you get recognized. You know, it's how you stand out amongst the crowd, and that is important because in the Japanese anime industry, so many anime come out every year. Literally so many that the industry can barely sustain itself. It does not have the manpower. That's how many shows come out. And if you go to a website that lists anime that are premiering for the fall season or the winter season, and they have little posters, like promotional posters next to the show, and you're scrolling through, not everyone has time to watch every single premiere of the season. You're gonna pick, like, at max, like 10, 15 shows if you're really into anime and, like, hardcore about it, but you're not gonna be able to watch every single show, which means that poster has to make a good first impression, or a really good show with a really generic art style is going to get lost in the shuffle and never get recognized. You know, for example, there's this show called Drifters. Now, I haven't watched a single frame of Drifters. I'll be totally honest with you, I haven't watched it yet. I don't know if I'm going to watch it, but I remember it. Months and months after it premiered, after having not watched it at all, I still remember Drifters because it had a distinct art style. It was something that I remembered that I didn't have to, like, write down or, you know, screenshot or anything. Drifters. I remember what it looks like. It was super distinct, super unique looking style. I mean, I think it kind of looked like Hellsing, but I think it was the same people. You know, and I still remember it, even though I haven't seen, like, a single frame of the show outside of the poster and, like, the first trailer maybe. It's still, like, I remember it because of that art style, because of that distinction there. Whereas the hundreds of other shows that have really generic art styles, I couldn't remember a single one of those posters that I scrolled by looking at anime premiering in whatever season Drifters came out in. Now, obviously there are modern anime with distinct art styles like My Hero Academia, and anime that are based off of old stuff like JoJo and Dragon Ball and One Piece, you know, but it really is important, you know, like I see when I'm going through Crunchyroll and they advertise a new anime, you know, I like animation and character designs and stuff, so of course, even if I'm not interested in the show, I'll scroll through and look at the character model sheets and stuff, and more often than not, I see the same shit, like the same generic shit. Brown-haired protagonist, kind of messy hair, school uniform, if it's that kind of show. The female characters are always way more interestingly designed, but at the same time still kind of fall into these same kind of stereotypes. It's just like, having that many main characters look the same, like in America, if that happened with a show, if a character looked just like another character from another show, people would call it a ripoff, but in Japan it's just standard practice. But yeah, it's definitely important to have that visual identity, because you could even have someone who, I mean, this is kind of a stretch because we live in the age of the internet, but you could have someone see an anime, think, that looks generic, but I do like that genre, or I do like that premise, so maybe I'll check it out later, and they didn't catch the name of the show, but they can't find it based on art style. They can't find it based on just looking for it through images or through anime websites, because it's like, it looks just like every other show. Now, of course, eventually you'll probably find it. Again, it is the age of the internet, but you still have to dig for it. You still have to go looking for it. It doesn't immediately stick out in your head. And I understand that it's hard to come up with an art style that you think will be appealing to everybody who's watching, but will also make you have your own distinct identity. But that doesn't mean just be lazy and recycle the same shit we've seen a million times. If you look at a lot of American shows in the recent decade, a lot of them have been going for a more simplistic style. Less shading, more rounder shapes, simpler shapes to make animation easier, to make producing it cheaper. However, they still maintain individuality. Like, you have something like We Bare Bears, which the bears in that look a lot like Adventure Time, but then the people don't. But there's still a little bit of saming there. Like, there's a little bit of sameness right there. But then you have something like Rick and Morty, which has elements of something like Adventure Time, but still, like, if you saw someone from Rick and Morty, you know it's them. If you saw a monster from Rick and Morty, you know it's that. Versus, like, or if you don't know Rick and Morty at all, you're not going to know what it's from, but you're going to know it's not a monster from Adventure Time. It's not a monster from Steven Universe. And it's the same thing across all of them. Steven Universe and Adventure Time have very distinct art styles that are simplistic, but distinct. Like I said, they are very different from each other at the same time. And it goes for a lot, you know, Over the Garden Wall. What else is there? There's a Gravity Falls. A lot of these shows have similar elements in their art design, but they're different enough to where you're not going to mistake them for each other. And I think that's something that anime has a problem with. One of the reasons Spectacular Spider-Man stands out so much in my head for Spider-Man shows is because of its very distinct art style from every other Spider-Man show. I couldn't really... I mean, I did just watch Spectacular Spider-Man recently, but even before rewatching Spectacular Spider-Man recently, that Peter Parker and those characters, I can always easily remember what they look like. But like the 90s Spider-Man, no, I don't recall what he looks like. I have a vague memory, but he looks kind of generic. I don't remember what the fucking Ultimate Spider-Man one looks like, but I barely even saw him, so that's not really a fair comparison. There was a CGI Spider-Man for a while. I don't remember what that Peter looked like. But Spectacular Spider-Man, before rewatching it, which was recently, I hadn't watched that show since it, like, aired, which was, like, back in 2009, and I still vividly remembered what all the characters looked like because of its distinct art style and visual identity. I also think it's important to point out that having a visual identity isn't enough. Of course, you need the substance to back it up. If you want people to continue to watch your show, it has to be good, of course. It has to be well written and creative and all that stuff. You can't have style over substance. That would be bad. But you need that hook. People aren't supposed to judge books by their cover, but people do. And in something like the anime industry, when there's so many things premiering, you can't help but judge a book by its cover. You can't help but think, well, those look generic and these look kind of cool, so I'm going to watch these. I can't watch everything, so I'll just have to just ignore those. Or you don't even think to yourself you'll ignore them. You just naturally ignore them because they naturally just don't look interesting. Anime is an industry where one distinct art style, which is standard anime, you know what I'm talking about, you can imagine it in your head. It's an industry where that one art style dominates the entire industry. Like, traces of that art style can be found in every anime. No matter how far off the rails it goes artistically, you can find that in every anime. So it might be difficult for some of these animators that are so used to drawing in this way to really break that and do their own thing, but I think they should, and I think there should be more visual variety in Japan. It would definitely make shows that look generic on the surface but are maybe really good. I don't have any examples, but it could make some really generic looking shows stand out and get more popular. Potentially. Of course, it could still fall under the radar for whatever reason. There's always variables. Having a distinct visual identity and a unique visual identity isn't just beneficial for the entire anime as a whole, but even for specific animators like Naotoshi Shida, Naoki Tate, Yoshikazu Tomita. These animators have very distinct styles. When they cut a scene together, you know it's them. Even if you don't know them by name, you recognize the patterns, you recognize the style. you know a specific person did that. I'm not saying every animator needs their own distinct style, because then you're going to have really jarring animation shifts in episodes, and you don't want that. You want animators like this to come in bursts, but having those distinct styles and having those distinct art styles and animation styles, both, you know, being very unique from everyone else, makes those animators stand out. It makes you recognize their names or want to learn their names. And that is a perfect example of why it is important to have a unique and distinct visual identity from everything else around you. You don't want to get lost in the shuffle, so you got to make a good first impression. What do you guys think, though? Do you think I'm off base? Do you think I'm right about this? It's just a random thought I had, so go ahead and tell me what you guys think in the comments section below. Give this video a thumbs up and share it on social media. Both those would help me out a lot. Subscribe if you haven't already, or if you like what you've seen here. Click that little bell to get notifications of when my videos go up. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.